This guy to my right over here, such a good-looking cat. He's probably caught more 10-pound bass than everyone in this room combined. So whether you guys have questions on forward-facing sonar, which is his specialty, I mean, that's the thing nowadays, or anything else, fire away, because Josh could answer them in a really nice way.
We're kind of opposites. He's the pro. I'm the social media pro.
Yeah.
We work good together.
And so we have our Bilge podcast set up here. So this is actually going to be a podcast. It'll be online. So everyone watching online, whether you're a high school angler or a young tournament angler that wants to learn a little bit more about bass fishing, hopefully some of the questions you have floating around in your head will be answered tonight. So with that being said, I want to thank Mike Brown over there with Gilchrist Automotive. That guy's a hammer. He actually coaches one of the high school teams. And if you're in the market for a non-Toyota, he could hook you up with the Chevys, the Rams, etc. And then Justin Rogers over there, he actually sold me this truck right here behind me. Awesome guy, and he runs the Toyota dealership up there in Lawton. And then thank you to David. Where's David? There's David right there. Thank you for hosting us, and thank you to your team for feeding us all the night, man. Appreciate you, David. That's awesome. We want to answer some questions here. So again, there's no rules. There's no dumb questions. Anything bass fishing at all, you guys can ask. And all that I ask is just sit down in that chair, bring the microphone real close to your mouth there, and fire away. So how about you, young man? Cash? Come on up, Cash. Yeah. What you got for us? Yeah.
So I was wondering what you guys is like. So I'm trying to get into throwing big swim baits.
Yeah.
I was wondering what you guys' favorite setups for big swim baits are.
Yeah. So the question is Cash, right? Yeah. So the question is, he wants to get into the big swim bait stuff, and the question is, what is your setup? I mean, right? You can't throw a swim bait on a spinning rod, right? Well, you can, but you're not going to land any of them. So, Josh, what is your swim bait setup?
There's cheap swim baits. There's $1,000 swim baits. There's $50 swim bait rods. There's $500 swim bait rods. I like to use the low end Dobbins Fury $129 rod, 20 or 25 pound monofilament primarily.
Oh no, that's a big deal.
Less abrasive, a little more stretch. My favorite swim bait, I'm not a real big glide bait swim bait guy like he is. 5-inch burrito by Bull Shad. So that's a quick moving swim bait. It's heavy. You're going to want to work it like a spinnerbait, like Jimmy Houston did back in the day. Got a foot under the water. It doesn't work very well moving it slow. So you're going to want to move it fast. So that's my fast moving swim bait. That's a 5-inch burrito. And the slow moving swim bait is a 316 Rising Sun top hook. There's a top and a bottom. You can work the top hook through brush a lot better than the bottom hook. So that's a fast swim bait and a slow swim bait. Those are my two favorite ones. Obviously, I tinker with the glide baits, not near as much as him. He's got a good swim bait too that I have used. It's a good swim bait.
Yep.
But this is the expert.
Yeah, no, Cash, swim bait fishing is it's highly addictive and it's very, very rewarding. I've gone down in flames in tournaments before, but I've also absolutely crushed the field with swim baits. The biggest thing is try not to get too caught up with, ooh, this certain type of swim bait. This is the hot swim bait, or that certain type of swim bait. That's the hot swim bait. Think about more of like the approach itself. So just like he said, I tell guys all the time, try replacing that spinner bait that we all know to throw down the bank. Replace that with a swim bait. You will get less bites, but they're going to be twice the size. Spinner bait, you may catch a 2-pounder, 3-pounder, that lay down, that overhanging tree, shade, whatever, wind blown point, whatever it is. Just replace that spinner bait with a 6-inch swim bait. A 6-inch is probably the best overall size for both bites and quality. But the biggest thing, again, is more of the technique and the approach. Do you fish off the bank, right? I mean, fish off the bank, maybe fish out of the high school boats. Instead of positioning the boat captain, instead of positioning the boat, inside the middle of the lake and casting to the bank, try positioning the boat a little bit closer to the bank, almost like you're bank fishing, and casting outwards towards the middle of the lake. What that does is it allows you to fish that swim bait uphill, and it stays in that strike zone a lot better. low and slow on the retrieve, nice and slow, just like if it was a spinnerbait, just rotating the blades. And the coolest thing about a Swimbait bite is it's never a question of, like you're fishing a jig or a worm, like my buddy Justin over there likes fishing, nice and slow. Oh, was that a bite? Let me just check on it and swing. Every single Swimbait bite is absolute murder job. I mean, smokes it. And 100% of the time. As far as the setup goes, just grab your flipping stick, your 7.5 foot heavy rod, 17 to 20-ish pound test. And again, just replace your spinnerbait with it, and you'll see. There'll be days where you don't get bites on it.
You get a lot of followers, too.
You get a lot of followers.
Big ones.
Both on forward-facing sonar and visually with your eyes. But the biggest thing is the approach and gaining confidence in it. And the best way to gain confidence is by getting bites. So just think about it a little, like 2 or 3 steps further than just this is the hottest Swimbait, let me just go throw it. Try throwing it uphill, fish wind-blown points, wind-blown guts, bluffs, and fish the most obvious pieces of structure on the lake you're fishing. If you're fishing a pond and it's got like the little fountain on there or like one little clump of reeds or something like that, fish the most obvious piece of cover that lake has to offer, and you'll be surprised what bites that thing.
So I was planning on going to boat art.
Yeah.
And the one thing I was going to throw all day was a Swimbait.
Yeah.
So that was my plan. I was just going to chunk and wind a Swimbait all day.
Yeah, do that.
So
Cash, excellent question. Grab you a Toyota bag and fill that thing up. Hey, get you some of those Swimbaits before the rest of them get it.
There's some 6 cents bags in there, too.
Yeah, and once we get through with all the questions, whatever's left over, I'm just going to start throwing it out there. All right, who's next? Yes, sir. Grayson Christian. Where's that at?
Sherman.
Okay, in Sherman, right here. Very cool. What's your name?
DJ.
DJ, how's it going?
I'm well. How are you?
Good.
Okay. What are your top 3 spring baits and techniques?
Yes. Okay, that's excellent. We're in the springtime. What are your top 3 favorite spring lures and techniques? Josh?
So Swimbait, your deal.
Yep.
What we're doing a lot of now is we're bed fishing, and not so much this year because it's been so windy, but we'll go down a bank throwing a big Swimbait, and you don't always catch them like we just talked about, but you'll see a 10 or 11 pounder. Just like last year. You were there.
Yeah.
The fish doesn't eat. It swims slowly away. That fish is probably on a bed. So then you turn around, you get your nifty little forward-facing sonar or your sunglasses, and you figure out where that bed is. And then you flip a panorama in there. So that's basically what I've been doing this year.
Nice.
Aside from the swim baits. We've been throwing some swim baits, but Swimbait, panorama on a shaky head, the best bed fishing bait there is. And we caught a couple 10s on a 12-inch worm the other day.
How many 10-pounders have you caught in the last month?
I don't know.
You lost count?
No, I lost
How many 10-pounders have you caught?
None.
Yeah, I got like 8. I got like 7 or 8.
We were catching 2 and 3 every day.
2 to 3 10-pounders
for the past 2 months.
Day. That's guiding on OHIV.
Now,
amazing.
A couple days we catch 4 or 5. A couple days we catch 1. What's today? Thursday?
Today's Thursday.
Yesterday we only caught 1. Only.
Poor guy.
Day before that we caught 2. So it's, it comes and goes. But the panorama on a bed, if you find a bed, whether it's with your eyes or with your sonar, the panorama on a shaky head, swim bait. He said 3 though.
Yeah. I think you nailed it.
Man, I'm not very diverse on the fishing. I got 2 rods on the deck of my boat most of the time. So
that's awesome.
Yeah, anyways.
So I'll give you my top 3 in the springtime. When you think about springtime fishing, the bass are all shallow, right? They want to make their beds. They want to reproduce. You're going to catch most of your fish outside of what he does. Generally speaking, you're going to catch most of your fish in the springtime in 6 feet of water or less, especially around here. You're from Sherman, Lake Texoma, all the other lakes around here, 6 feet of water or less. You want to look for flats. If you look up on the bank, not the real cliffy or pointy stuff, you're just going to look for flat banks. And although they look kind of ugly, kind of featureless, that's where they like to spawn. If you have a little pea gravel, little hard spots, maybe a nice flat with a lay down on it, there's going to be a fish on that every single time. So springtime, think flats. And just because last week I was throwing a frog, I'm going to say topwater frog. Those are some of the nastiest bites you could get. But you got to think frog fishing, it's topwater fishing. as our temperatures start to rise a little bit, air temperatures in the 80s, water temperatures in the mid to upper 60s, that topwater frog is hard to beat. And what you want to target is those little shade pockets. Anything shade on those flat banks, throw a frog over there, and you will get some of the most vicious bites you could actually get. Second lure would be a spinnerbait, just a 3/8 or a half-ounce spinnerbait. I mean, you could find them anywhere. Whenever the wind is blowing, or a day like today when it's cloudy, some of those flat little areas with a nice little point in the middle of them, maybe spinnerbait slow rolled. Biggest thing, like Jimmy Houston taught us, fish that spinnerbait just out of sight. Okay, so if you're in a fishery that's clear water and you can see down 8 feet of water, fish that thing in 9 to 10 feet of water. If you're on a muddy lake, visibility is 2 feet of water, fish that thing in 3 feet. Just out of sight, slow roll it, and a lot of big ones eat a spinnerbait in the spring. And then just, thirdly, will just be a regular jig, just a pitching jig. And a jig imitates a crawdad. It imitates a bluegill. It imitates pretty much anything that swims. It's just a lot of bulk to it. And I like a nice trailer that's got a lot of flappiness to it. A couple lures back here that imitate it really well. Jig, spinnerbait, and a frog in the springtime are really hard to beat. Come and get you some stuff.
Thanks.
We'll go with this guy right here, and we'll work our way back. How's it going, big dog?
Okay. What's your favorite way to break down a new lake?
Go ahead and pull that mic a little bit closer to you.
What's your favorite way to break down a new lake?
Yeah, what's your name?
Landon.
Landon?
Sir.
Landon. So the question is, what's your favorite way to break down a new lake? That's a great question, because in y'all's THSBA tournaments, you're fishing new lakes every month, right? And it's so hard sometimes to figure out a brand new fishery where the locals have the advantage over you. How do you beat those guys, It really starts at home or on your phone through mapping apps. If you think about it, seasonal patterns, you could always revert back to seasonal patterns. Spring and fall, they're going to be on shallow flats. Winter and summer, they're going to be on the deeper stuff. So here we are in spring. If I go to a new lake, I'm going to pull out my phone, look up a Navionics app or the Lake Master app, and look for those flat banks I was talking about. Maybe preferably some deeper water nearby, or an underwater channel swing that swings into these flat pockets and flat areas. So I'll just kind of graze over and just kind of look over my map. Oh, that looks good. That looks good. That looks good. When I finally get out on the water, I will start testing these areas with those lures, the spinnerbait, the jig, the frog. But I always revert back to seasonal patterns. And there aren't a lot of exact science, science topics in the sport of bass fishing. There's no exact science, but that is pretty darn close, because if the bass didn't go deep in the summer, deep in the winter, and then shallow in the spring and fall, they'd simply go extinct. So they have to stick to those seasonal patterns. So if you recognize those seasonal patterns and those types of areas, and this is all research you could do online, just Google it and those things will pop up. But it all starts with that magical app on my phone, Navionics or Lake Master. I start
YouTube.
there, or YouTube. YouTube's a great one too. But we do everything we can to gather as much info as we can before hitting the water. Some of the guys I fish against are very, very good at acquiring information, before we actually hit the lake. Quick Google searches and YouTube searches give up a lot. I mean, you watch a kid catch a 6 or 7 pounder on a bluff wall bank, and you're like, oh, wow, that was February. Maybe I should be fishing bluff wall banks in February. So a lot of research is online. You kids are good with it these days, obviously, but stick to those seasonal patterns, and that is something that is almost exact science.
And then once you get to the lake, cover water. I cover as much water as I can on the lake. Coming from the crappie tournament side of things, basically before the sonar, everyone's motto was the more tree stumps you hit, the better shot you have to win, because you cover more water and you're putting your bait in front of more fish. It's not like quail hunting. The more miles you walk, the more coveys you're going to jump up. So that's my 2 cents on a new lake.
And that's a good point, because on a new lake, you want to break it down as quickly as possible. I mean, Matt's only giving us 8 hours a day to figure it out, right? And your boat captain, maybe he wants to sit back, eat potato chips and a sandwich and just chill and say, cast over there. You want to be proactive when it comes to tournament bass fishing. The more water you cover, the more information you're receiving to make those adjustments along the way. And over time, you'll start to recognize that windblown point was awesome. Maybe I could duplicate that windblown point on other parts of the lake. So the more water you cover, the better off you are. Go grab you some tackle. That was a good one, Landon. How about right here in black? How you doing? Good.
So when you're fishing a lake and your pattern dies off, what's the best way to find a new one?
Yeah, what's your name?
Jeremiah.
Jeremiah. Question is, when you're fishing a lake and your pattern dies off, you stop getting bites. What the heck do you do then? What do you do then?
Me?
Yeah.
I go to a different lake.
Yeah, he does. This guy puts more miles on his Gilchrist truck
Yeah,
than anyone out here.
that's what I do.
I think they're starting to get a little agitated too.
I
All those miles he put on the truck.
97,000 miles on my Ram last year.
Oh my gosh, that's more than me. And I travel to Florida every year, New York every year.
I went to Florida 3 times, Minnesota once, Montana once, Idaho.
So seriously though, okay, so the bite, okay, say you catch them in the morning from 8 o'clock to 10 o'clock. By 11, from 11 to 2, no bites, no nothing. You're not seeing anything on the graph. I mean, and you can't go to a new lake. What do you do?
I'm gonna fish previous history
Yeah.
that I know
Yep.
at Ivy. I'm gonna go look at the wolf packs. I call them wolf packs, schools of fish
Yep.
that I found last year or last week or whatever. The wolf packs, schools of fish, typically, if you find them, they're gonna stay in the area for weeks or
Feeding
months.
areas, yeah.
Yeah, that crankbait bite I was on 2 months ago, those fish just left this week.
Wow.
This week was the first time I didn't see them there. So when the bite slowed down on the main lake, I would make that 20-minute run up the river and hit my crankbait hole and go back to it. So I'm basically fishing stuff that I fished last year before, or last week even.
No, that's a good question because we all deal with it, right? I mean, it's so hard. I mean, most of the time, doesn't matter what time of year, that morning bite's pretty fire, pretty good, but it peters off by about 11 o'clock. But I'll tell you, from 10 to 2 is when you catch big ones. So just when you think the bite is petering off and it's starting to suck a little bit, just be prepared because every cast you make throughout the day can be a clue that leads you to, catching big fish at the tournament or whatever it is. But for me, when my main plan A and plan B, when they die off, I'm not the guy that sits in the bottom of his boat and goes through every single tackle box. Maybe I should try this. This one doesn't have enough flake in it. Maybe I should try this color. I'm really not that guy. Some guys make that work where they go through the whole gamut of lures. To me, it's more about finding the location of where they move to. Let's say you caught them in the morning and it was in the back of a pocket, really, really shallow. Just think about where they moved to. They can't go far. They're not going to swim to the other side of the lake. Let's say we're in the back of that pocket, bite dies off. They're going to be somewhere in between the mouth of that pocket and maybe just inside the main lake, that typical area, or isolated pieces of cover within that cove itself. So I encourage you to do less of the retying this and untying that and redoing this. A little bit less of that and try to think and challenge yourself. Okay, it's a thinking game. Where did these things go, right? They didn't go far. Let's try to figure out where they went. A lot of times, follow where the wind is blowing. What the wind does is it pushes those fish in the back of that pocket. Let's say you catch them in the back of the pocket, then the wind starts blowing to one side of that pocket. I'm always going to fish that side because it churns up the water, churns up the plankton, churns up the bait fish, the crawdads. There's just more life and more activity going on the windy sides of the points and banks that you're fishing. So, when your boat captain says, oh, I don't want to go over there, it's too windy, a lot of times that's where it's going down. And yes, in the springtime when they're spawning, the calmer sides are going to be the better sides. The north banks that have the most sun are going to be your primo areas. But when that bite dies down, just think, okay, they couldn't have gone far. Let's pick up a reaction bait, cover water quickly, and just kind of figure out where they went to. Once you get that bite at 11 o'clock, run with that kind of scenario and that pattern and try to duplicate it throughout the lake. All right, Jeremiah, go get some tackle. Let's go to this side and we'll go back over there. In black right there. How's it going?
Good.
Go ahead and pull that mic a little bit closer there. There you go.
Do you think Alabama rigs are a fair bait to throw?
It's a good question. What's your name?
Zane?
Z-
Zane?
Zane. I love these names, man. These kids nowadays got awesome names.
You go first.
Dude, like Josh and Chris, those are terrible names. I want a name like Zane. Zane Zaldain. How about that? That would be amazing. Do you think Alabama rigs are fair to throw?
And how would you work it?
Say again?
And how would you like retrieve it?
And retrieve it, yeah. To answer that first question, do I think Alabama rigs are fair to throw? Yes, absolutely. Absolutely fair to throw. As long as you're adhering to the state laws on how many hooks. For those of you who don't know, an Alabama rig is a umbrella rig. It literally looks like a stripped umbrella, 5 different wires coming from it. I think in Texas it's 5 hooks. We can use 5 hooks
No, you can use as many as you want.
Oh, as many as you want in Texas. And it basically imitates a giant school of shad, and it triggers bass into biting when they won't bite anything else. Maybe a slow jerk bait with long pauses in the wintertime, but especially in January and February, you cannot beat an Alabama rig. You guys are allowed to throw them in the high school tournaments? Yes. So yeah, it's absolutely fair to throw, and I would utilize it in every early spring tournament you guys have. The retrieve is much like the swim bait. I always like to fish it uphill, cast out towards the middle of the lake, let that thing sink down, use forward-facing sonar, watch that thing swim, sink down. I like to keep it, 3 to 5 feet off the bottom and slow wind it back. It's always a slow reel. It's never this crazy jerking or pausing. Every now and then I'll give it a nice little pump where it flares up those arms a little bit, and sometimes that triggers fish into biting. Try to select an Alabama rig that's got blades on it. Blades are a beautiful thing on an Alabama rig. Make sure you keep all the swim baits on that Alabama rig absolutely straight. If you have 1 or 2 that are cockeyed and rigged up a little bit sideways, it just doesn't look natural to some of these 10-pound bass that we're trying to fool. So make sure everything is squared away, nice and straight. I love throwing it on like a 20-pound fluorocarbon, 20, 25-pound fluorocarbon, sometimes mono. But I would stay away from the braid. Some guys use the braid, but what happens is when you cast braid with an Alabama rig or a big swim bait, sometimes you'll get that little backlash that'll stop that thing, and boom, there goes your $30 Alabama. Yeah, he knows because he's done it a million times. We all have. And that braid, whether it's 50 or 65, it'll snap that thing. It'll go flying. There goes your swim bait. There goes your whole Alabama rig. So try to stick with a 20 to 25 fluoro or monofilament. It's always just a slow and low retrieve with occasional pumps, and it just gets those blades and swim baits moving, pumping. I know he's got a forward-facing sonar twist on the whole Alabama rig thing.
Yeah.
Is your boat equipped with forward-facing sonar?
Yeah.
Yeah, you're dialed, and you've watched it fall down, right? Yeah, you could almost count the blades and arms on it. So he's caught a lot of big ones on it.
My biggest bass ever came on an A-rig. I'm fishing open water suspended bass. Keep the A-rig above the fish. So if you have 3-foot visibility, keep it 3 foot above it. 10-foot visibility, 10 foot above it. For me, I found it works best when the temperature is below 50 degrees. So if it's below 50, I'm going to have it, tied on, definitely throwing it. 20-pound fluorocarbon most of the time, but do not bring that bait even with that fish because you might scare the fish, run into it. Keep it above it, and they'll turn around. Don't ever stop it. Just your slow, steady retrieve, perfectly level. If it falls, that's not natural. They don't like that. Level or up, like he said.
One thing I've learned fishing with Josh, and like I said, he's caught more 10-pound bass than all of us, is he always keeps his presentation above the fish. It's almost like he wants that fish to come at, let's say this microphone here is a tree. He fishes a lot of trees. I know HIV. I know there's some out here in Texoma. There's a big fish sitting in this tree. She's just chilling. And you bring that A-rig right behind her. You may spook her. She may turn around and go to another tree. If you keep it above her head, 3-4 feet above her head, there's almost this threshold. If you pull her off that tree as your A-rig is swimming by, there's a point to where if she swims a foot or two, she is absolutely committed. And I find fishing with him that's what he does with a lot of his presentations, swim jigs, swim baits, Alabama rigs, is when you get her to move and to commit, she is committed to biting that thing. So it's very important to keep it above their head. You're almost tapping into their predatory instinct. Is when you pull her off that tree and she's coming for it, she's going to get it. She's going to expel the energy to come out, 2 feet. She's going to come 4,
She's
5,
already
6
committed.
feet. Absolutely. but don't ever kill it. Just keep the cadence. She knows where she's going to intercept that thing, and it's so much fun to watch. All right, Zane, go get some tackle.
It's one of my favorite baits too, by the way.
Is it really? That's awesome. We'll go green hat over here, then we'll come back over here. What's up, big guy? You were like one of the first dudes that were sitting in the chair right there.
I just have one question.
Yeah. What's your name?
Wyatt.
Wyatt.
During the cold months.
Yep.
What are y'all favorite lures?
Yeah. The question is, during the colder months, what are your favorite lures? There's really two. We just talked about one. We went over that very well. Alabama rig. Temperatures 50 degrees or under. That thing is killer. You gotta think, in the wintertime, fish are slow, lethargic. They're just like us. It's hard to get out of bed when it's 30 degrees out, 40 degrees out. We don't want to move much. We're bundled up. We're trying to save as much energy and warmth as possible, so we're not going to move around a lot. I'll tell you what does get me out of bed and what moves me is a big old feast, something huge, like a big A-rig. Nothing, imitates a large school of shad, which is what they predominantly eat in the wintertime. Nothing imitates that better than an Alabama rig. And again, going back to this, it motivates them to move. Although it's cold, water temperatures are in the 40s, it just triggers them into biting that Alabama rig. A close second is going to be a suspending jerkbait, one with a deeper, longer bill that goes down to 8-10 feet of water on 12-pound test fluorocarbon. Slow jerks, jerk, pause, jerk, pause. Again, metabolism slow. They don't want to move around and chase a bunch of spinner baits, and swim baits move fast. So slow presentation just above their head, and it'll get them out of bed to attack that thing. Alabama rig and a jerk bait slow.
Alabama rig and a swim jig.
Swim jig.
So best day I ever had was swim jigging in the winter. Just a small profile, slow, steady retrieve.
And I'll also add to that, try to fish the clearest area of the lake you're fishing. In other words, stay away from the upper, muddier areas. Just Lake Texoma, for example, you start to get up in some of those rivers, starts to get a little muddy. Yes, the water's going to be warmer. Yes, the water warms up faster. But in the wintertime, they rely a lot on vision, on sight, feeding by sight. That's why that Alabama rig looks so good in that clearer water. Fish the lower ends of the lake. A lot of times within sight of the dam is the best bet for wintertime fishing. Hard bottoms too. Fish hard bottoms, vertical rock walls. Awesome. And try to stay around those shad, those bait fish, because that's what they're eating all through the wintertime. And by the way, that's the best time to catch some absolute giants. Best time of year. They're starting to develop eggs. There's less fishing pressure out there because, again, it's cold, not a lot of fishermen out. They're easier to trick if you're around them.
December is the best month to fish.
Yeah.
It's my favorite.
Yeah, for big ones.
Everyone's still kind of deer hunting, and the lake is pretty empty.
Wyatt, go get you some tackle. Matter of fact, since you were the first one here, grab here. Let me grab you. Don't worry, there's plenty more for you guys today. That one's a Gerald Swindle special right there. That's a G-Man, yeah. And then get you some tackle as well. I said I'll go over here. Cowboy hat. Love it. Love the boots, dude.
Thank you.
Are those ostrich?
Yes.
Yeah. What's your name?
Malachi.
Malachi.
Malika?
Mhm.
I love it. Metallica? Malika?
So this time of year, what would you throw on a smaller, clear lake? Where would you throw it, and what would you throw?
Yeah, so question is, where would we look? What would we throw on a smaller, clearer lake? Are you talking like a pond, fishing from the bank? Or are you talking like just smaller?
Yeah, like a smaller lake.
Smaller type.
Kinda
Does it
like-
have a dam on it or
Yeah.
no? Okay, so yeah, so smaller lakes, clearer water. Go ahead,
The
Josh.
flats. I'd find whatever flat is there because that's probably where they're going to be spawning,
Mhm.
most likely. I don't know what lake you're talking about, but try to find something rocky. Those fish really like to spawn on rock
Yeah.
and on hardwoods.
Yeah.
So if you can find rock and hardwoods on a flat,
What are you
That-
throwing on them?
There's so many different
So
things.
many different things. Yeah.
If you're just fishing, because I got to look at it from a fishing and a forward-facing sonar, 10-inch worm, 12-inch worm,
Yeah.
Texas rigged.
So one of my favorite things to do on some of these smaller, clearer lakes this time of year, let's say we're going fishing tomorrow, you and I, you put me on that lake, I'm going to look for flats. I mean, this is springtime. This is April, right? Late April.
Yeah.
Those flat banks, I'm just going to scan the lake without even looking at the map and topography. I'm just going to look at the bank line, and I'm going to stay away from those mountains, those rolling hills, right? Because what's on the bank is typically what's under the water there. So I'm going to look for the flattest bank I could find, and then I'm going to look for isolated pieces of cover, like flat stump, flat, isolated grass clump. Those fish will spawn. They'll hang out for a week or so. The males, the females will stick around for 2 or 3 days. But isolated pieces of cover, like if this was the flat and these camera stands are the isolated pieces of cover, I love grabbing a wacky rigged lunker log on a spinning rod and just pitch that thing right next to that isolated piece of cover. If you're on a flat this time of year and there's one standalone stump or one standalone lay down or one standalone dock, there's going to be a fish on that 100% of the time in 6 feet of water or less. So take your time, ease into it. Tell yourself that's an isolated piece of cover on a flat. There will be a fish there. How do I get it to bite? A lot of times this time of year, it's not the real fast rattle traps, not the real fast buzz baits or spinner baits.
Yeah.
It's something slow falling, wacky rigged stick bait. And a lot of times you could catch some of the biggest fish doing that, fishing isolated pieces of cover like that.
Yeah.
We're after those bigger females. Yes, there's those males cruising around and everything like that. But those big females, before going on their beds, will hang out on that isolated piece of cover. And there's nothing better than a slow falling worm right there. And she's got to have it. She's got to have it. So, and one thing with that too, when we're fishing a spinning rod on with a wacky rigged worm, always think about, let's not cast behind that mic stand or behind that stump or whatever it is, that obstacle, that dock.
Yeah.
Try to fish in front of it. That way, when that big fish bites, the big fish of the tournament bites, you actually have a shot at landing it. And think about, when I get this bite on that piece of cover, okay, she's either going to go that way, or towards me, not out that way.
Yeah.
Always thinking about where we're going to take this fish once it actually bites. So something slow, pitching a jig or pitching a worm on isolated pieces of covers.
Yeah.
And if it's clear, go look for them with your eye.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's always fun too. That just kind of, you'll see on a clear water lake, you'll see where the males have fanned off a bed.
Yeah.
A lot of times they'll show up as nice big like sand spots or rocky spots. On some lakes they're dark instead of light, but I mean, you'll know, right? I mean, you'll know when you see that beautiful bed like that. And take your time too. Tell your boat captain or dad or whoever's running the boat, nice and slow. And if you start seeing these beds, fish real slow through that area, and that's how you catch really big ones.
I have one more question.
Yeah.
How do you pronounce your last name?
Zaldain, Zaldain.
Okay.
Great question. He still gets it wrong. Get you some tackle.
What is that, French?
It is French, Spanish. I said I was going to go over this way. Real anxious guy over here with the awesome hair.
With the awesome hair.
Bro, are you in high school? Come on, dude. Shouldn't you be at like practice for football or something?
Something.
Yeah.
All right,
What's your name?
Arm wrestle.
That's
Grayson.
a big dude right there, dude.
Grayson.
Grayson?
Yeah, I got a few.
Yeah.
All right. So, what's the best way to target fish
Yep.
after a storm?
After a storm, that's a good one.
I mean, it might not be a correct answer
That's a
to
good
this,
one.
like at all. But
So,
you do.
Grayson, boy, after a storm gets real tricky because that air temperature drops, right? After a storm comes through, a lot of times it's followed by a north wind. Sometimes you get lucky and it stays, that low pressure sticks around sometimes and it stays kind of gloomy like a day like today. You could really catch them. A lot of times right before the storm, make sure you got your ears up because, man, so that's some of the best fishing pre-frontal like that just before it hits. During the storm, it starts to peter off. And a lot of times after the storm, they kind of shut down a little bit depending on what lake you're at. The biggest piece of advice is going back to the wind thing. As that storm blows through, think about how that water churns up. Those waves start pounding on one of your favorite banks. Though that's an opportunity for a big largemouth bass to pick up the scraps, so to speak. You know, when that water gets churned up, bait fish and things get churned up. So I always like going for the windy side of the lake after that storm blows through and just trying to find fish that are picking up the scraps off the rocks, off the docks, off that piece of cover like that. So some of the best baits you could throw this time of year after a storm is a jerk bait. We got some jerk baits over here. Make sure you grab some. Just a shallow running jerk bait, 4 to 5 feet of water. I will throw it right up against the bank, a wind-blown bank like that. Look for mud lines too. A lot of times when a storm blows through, it'll muddy up and churn up that water. Right where that mud line is, you got 5 to 6 feet of muddy stained water off that post frontal bank right there, right on that front side. Bass use that just like a little, just like like a lay down. They'll hang out right on that mud line and feed right there where that mud line starts. They'll eat in the clear water, but they'll hang out in that muddy water. It's a really cool thing to watch. But Mother Nature does what she does, and we just have to make the adjustments from there. So she's always throwing something at us, right? Either north wind on tournament day, temperature drops, high winds. You guys deal with them all the time during the high school tournaments. But everything she throws at us is a new opportunity to figure something else out. So always ask yourself, okay, again, we had an awesome morning, prefrontal. The front comes through, storm blows through. Now let's really think about where they could have gone. So jerk bait, spinner bait again. If you really want to slow down, a drop shot or Senko.
I'm offshore most of the time, so my fish aren't really as affected.
It's a good point. It's a really good point.
But they do get affected. So when something like that happens, downsize. That's really the only thing you can do. Just keep throwing at them. But downsize your line. I figured out in Idaho recently that downsizing your line can play a big part into getting more bites. So when they get finicky, especially east wind comes, downsize your bait, downsize your line.
That's a good point, actually. And it's not what you would think. When he says downsize your line, we're looking for more bites. Let's say you go from chatterbait and 17-pound test, 20-pound test. Let's, down, or a worm or a drop shot or something like that. When he says downsize, we automatically think, a smaller line diameter. They won't see it as much. It's more of the lighter the line you go, the less diameter is there, and it gives that bait more action, and it really, really makes a difference. A small swim bait, or heck, even some of these 6-inch swim baits we have on 20 and 17-pound tests restricts the nose of that bait just enough for them to think, man, that thing doesn't look natural, especially after a storm blew through. If you downsize the 15, sometimes 12-pound test, there's less restriction there. It gives more action in that bait, and it gives those fish another chance to come up and think, hey, look, that fake piece of plastic that looks like a fish is actually a fish. So when he says downsize, it's more of giving that bait more action than what you're used to with 17 or 20 pound.
All right. What do you think about these guys running 4 or 5 sonars on their boat?
Yeah, dude.
How many do you run?
Oh, dude. All right. So we just did a video on that. I don't know if you saw that one, but I go around asking some of the guys on tour how much they paid for their electronic setup. For one, you're not supposed to ask that, but heck, it's YouTube, right? And anything goes. I asked them how much their setups were and then how many different live transducers and graphs they had. And it varied from a guy had 4 graphs on his console, 3 up front, 2 transducers up front, live transducers, 4 in the back, 2 lives, and then 2, side imaging, down imaging, all that stuff. Upwards of $50,000 in electronics. That's just crazy. And you got to think, like, professional bass fishing or just fishing out with your buddies, we're always trying to one-up each other, whether it's in the locker room or whatever. We're always trying to be the best, right, at what we do. But there is absolutely a line, and a lot of the guys cross that line, $2,500, $3,000 per graph times 7. I mean, that's a lot of money, and it is absolutely unnecessary. I'm telling you right now. Again, this guy has caught more 10-pound bass than everyone on the tour I fish, all 100-plus guys, and he only uses 1 live transducer. Just 1. That's all you need. That's really all you need.
I think it's gimmicky. You can put them in the back.
Right. It is.
And you can only look at one at a time anyways, and you're going to be fishing up front. You know, I mean,
Yeah. You can only make one cast with one rod, one lure. So you only need one beam on that lure on that fish.
They're like side scanning with them. What's the point with that?
Yeah. So, and that's a weird
so they
thing.
can cover more water. I think they claim, but I mean, it's.
I mean, you're seeing the same thing on side scan.
Yeah, it's gimme. For those who don't know, it's live scope. Some guys are now mounting them to their transoms or their jack plates to where a live transducer beam is a very thin beam that shoots out in front of the boat. Now, when you have two on the rear of your boat, you just turned your side imaging, old school side imaging, into a live image. But what happens is it's literally a sheet of paper, a sheet of cardboard that is scanning at idle speed by that piece of cover or structure. So anything on that point or that flat or whatever it is just going to show up briefly unless you put it in reverse and like stay on that fish. Right. So when he says it's gimmicky, it kind of is, because you literally just sweep right past them, and it's nothing that side imaging will show you. And side imaging has been around for 20 years. Where he does his damage, I've seen this with him, guys on tour with live sonar. All your work is done at the front of the boat. What are you going to do? Idle by that fish and you see it on live. Oh, let me just hop up to my boat, undo the little strap thing, grab a rod, and cast from my seat. All your work is done at the front of the nose of your boat. So again, you could only see one fish at a time, make one cast at a time. So when he says it's gimmicky and he is the forward-facing sonar absolute king, it really is.
I've only looked at my side scan less than 5 times in 4 years,
and he's covering more water than like I could, go to a small lake like he was talking about and idle around side imaging. He will probably on the trolling motor see more fish, more life with panning his trolling motor and fishing on 80-90%, just scanning around. He'll see 10 times as many fish than I will side imaging around, thinking I'm idling and fishing fast and looking at what's down there. Really, all your work is done at the nose of your boat, really, with your pedal. And I know you got some very good insight, and you told me, I hopped in the boat with him for the first time 4 years ago or so. He told me one thing that has stuck with me ever since. And do you remember what you told me with forward-facing sonar?
Don't take your foot off the pedal.
Keep your foot on the pedal. And that means both moving it left to right and just moving fast.
I got just quick short for you, right quick. Number one, why don't you go pro? Why don't you just jump forward and at least try it out?
He makes more money than us, that's why.
True. I've heard about them guide prices.
Yeah. So I'm at kind of, I don't want to talk about myself too much. I'm at the pinnacle of where I can be, pretty much, as a guide, social media guy, whatever. I think I can compete with these guys.
Absolutely.
I fish with a lot of them.
Absolutely.
A lot of them have said I'm the best fisherman they've ever seen. I'm not.
He is.
I hate saying that.
He is.
But I can't win them all. I can't top 10 them all. I can't top 50 them all. If I have a couple bad tournaments, I lose credibility in a way, kind of. So I really have nothing to gain from it. I would love to go out there and compete, but right now, maybe 5 years from now, but right now it would do more harm than good for me. Plus, I got to go catch the biggest bass in the United States every day.
Yeah.
Or try to catch them at least.
His guide service is very, very successful. And there are guys on my Elite Series tour who like to guide in the off season to make some extra cash. I mean, he is absolutely crushing it. And I'll tell you right now, tournament fishing can be very, very stressful because you're on the clock 8 hours, and guiding can be too, but tournament fishing, a lot of times you're stressing over just a 15-pound bag, He's out there trying to catch 15-pounders, and his clients understand that, like, hey, we are hunting big ones and big ones only. So he makes a darn good living. I don't think he needs a tournament fish, to tell you the truth, but he can absolutely hang. You're seeing this thing. I don't know if you guys follow the Elite Series, a tour I fish. You're seeing this phenomenon right now where these 19 and 20-year-old kids are hitting the scene and relying on their electronics just like he does and absolutely crushing it on tour on unfamiliar bodies of water, just by relying on that magical tool, that forward-facing sonar tool. And everything I learned growing up fishing, following contour lines and seasonal patterns and where they should be, that stuff isn't as valuable as seeing it live right now. And when he says to keep your trolling motor or your foot on the trolling motor and just scan around, it doesn't matter how much knowledge you have going back 20 years, 30 years, knowing where they should be on what they should be hanging out. Like he's getting the answers right now when he's scanning around. Oh, there's a fish on a brush pile. Maybe I should look at brush piles from now on. And they learn that much faster than these seasonal
or middle of the lake.
Yeah.
Another tip, put a chair up front, something to lean against. Because when your foot's on the pedal all day, you need balance. And take it from me, I had knee surgery from basically forward-facing sonar, tearing up my knees from balancing over a 4 or 5 year period. I started using it in 2015, and I had knee surgery in 2019. So that definitely contributed to, the downfall of my knee, just balancing up there all day long.
Go grab you some lures. 3 hats, a bag, towel, 3 hats, 3 lures. Where'd all my swim baits go? Some of you guys have been taking more than 3 baits down there. My swim baits are all gone.
What were you going to say?
Tackle warehouse hat over there. How are we doing? Are you a high school angler?
Yes, I just finished my senior year.
Awesome. What school?
Silo.
Okay, cool.
I have 2 questions for y'all.
Excellent. What's your name?
Dayla.
Dayla?
Yes, sir.
Awesome name.
My first one is, how is it like on a day-to-day basis as a pro angler that most people do not see?
Wow. Yeah. What's it like as a pro angler that knows? I got to give a shout out to my wife because being a pro angler, it is so hectic. Sometimes it's stressful. We have to go out there and almost force a smile on our face because with cameras and everything. Now, don't get me wrong. We make an awesome living, and it's a dream job. It really is a dream job. If you do take the steps from high school to college to the Opens level to the Elite Series level, it is an absolute fun journey. You meet a lot of cool people. You get to see a lot of things. Being out in the middle of the Great Lakes when no one's around, that's some of the coolest stuff ever. But when I get back to that RV, like having a hot cooked meal, from my wife or whatever it is, those types of things, like I couldn't do what I do without that stuff. I travel with 3 dogs in my RV, so it's an absolute circus. But some things that guys won't talk about on tour it's just stressful. It really is, because if you're having a bad week, a bad season, you're one step behind the fish. Some of these guys go absolutely broke doing it. They rack up credit card debt, and this is the truth of it. Rack up credit, and a successful guide like him doesn't have to worry about that. But when you try to force those fish into biting week after week after week, and it just doesn't happen, and you're just off, and it can become very stressful. Our gas bills, our gasoline bills go, are unbelievable. Lodging, all that stuff. So $50,000 in entry fees. I mean, it's very, very hectic on your wallet. But again, it is so worth it if you take the appropriate steps from high school to college, fish your way through, take it one step at a time. It is so worth it. And you could make a very good living doing it. But yeah, that life off the water, it's always go, go, go. You get wrapped up with one tournament. Okay, where do I got to be next week? Very hectic. And one thing about the sport of professional bass fishing is it's not like any other professional sport where we have agents and we have assistants booking everything. It's all on us. It really is. And if I don't do it, or if my wife doesn't do it, and it simply doesn't get done. Off the water life is pretty hectic, but it's just like everything else. If you guys are baseball players or whatever it is, it's all about finding a balance.
Yeah.
It's stressful.
It is.
Building relationships is
huge.
Very important.
Huge. That's why we're all here today. Our relationship with Gilchrist Automotive.
Sponsorships.
Huge.
These are long-term deals, that hopefully won't go anywhere. But that eliminates a lot of the stress. Yeah. Yeah. Just trying to maintain those relationships with sponsors.
Yeah, I mean, that's my goal. I'm going to college for fishing, and hopefully I can make pro or do it.
So what's really cool is seeing young female anglers, with social media and the high school programs that they put together. It is now cool for young female anglers to be a part of a boys club. That's what it is, right? For the last 3 decades, it's been a boys club, but we're seeing all these female anglers who are hungry to compete with these boys. And some of you guys are absolutely great fisherwomen. And my wife did it for a long time, but it's really cool because, sponsorships and partnerships that he talks about, it is definitely more appealing as a female angler to approach sponsors than it is to be just another dude like me or him, just another dude,
Yeah.
So yeah, if you could catch them just halfway decent and keep a smile on your face, post on social media, you are way more valuable to sponsors than the average Joe.
Yeah.
Film everything.
I normally, if I go fishing, I usually take a picture and post
Yeah,
it.
that's fine. That's fine,
I don't
too.
video myself because I feel awkward, but...
It feels weird. It does.
I feel weird.
Like hearing your own voice on camera, that's the worst. That is the worst.
We hate watching
I hate it.
Yeah.
But no, I'll take pictures and post them.
That's good. And that goes for everyone in the room here. It's all about social media, gathering sponsorships and partnerships. The only way to do that is by just keeping a camera, just, keeping a phone with you. If something like a cool fish catch or something happens, share it with our community. And that's what helps you stand out and become successful in the sport.
And with Bodark Lake opening up, this is a perfect opportunity for anyone to put a GoPro on and something magical might happen, because that lake's going to be one of the best lakes in the country for the next 5 years.
Yeah, it's just down the road.
And everyone that hears about it's going to be typing Bodark Lake, and
that's all going to pop up.
Yeah, they type in Swimbait fishing, his name comes up.
Yeah.
Well, they type in Bodark, your name might come up, you know?
Okay, I have one more question.
Yeah.
What is the best bait to throw when the fish are suspended?
Oh, that's Josh's question.
Well, what time of year?
Generally speaking.
12
yeah, let's
months
just do general.
A swim jig.
Swim jig.
Cut the brush guard off. You don't need a brush guard.
Here it comes. There it is.
That's slow, steady retrieve. So that little swim jig, it has silicone, skirt. The silicone, you just as slow as you can possibly reel it without letting it fall. Keep it coming this way. That it just pulses. That skirt just barely moves, and it's enough for those big females. They got huge eyes. They're sitting there looking at it. They see that little bitty movement, and they just can't resist it. And it's not a thump. Sometimes they just grab it, and you better set the hook.
So when Josh was posting all these huge 10 and 12 and 13, 14 pounders on a swim jig with no trailer, some of these veterans on tour, these 20-year veterans on tour, they're like, what's with this Josh Jones guy and fishing a swim jig without a trailer? What kind of dumb stuff is that? And they're just jealous you're catching 50-pound bags on that thing. But a lot of times it's a little goes a long way. And what I mean by that is just that subtle action that he's talking about. None of this big flappy stuff. It's just that subtle action that convinces that 15-year-old bass that, hey, that thing is nice and subtle. It's real. It looks real. It feels real. It's got the right profile. It's just above my head. I'm going to come up and just barely eat that.
And sometimes they just barely
get it. Yeah, that's a cool bite. It really is. For me, suspended fish, a jerk bait. You're seeing that a lot on tour. A lot of forward-facing sonar.
Yeah.
Really, the only way to target fish nowadays is by looking down at that screen and just kind of seeing where they're at. The easiest ones to catch are when they're just 6 feet below the surface.
Oh, yeah.
And yeah, exactly. You know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
And then, you let your lure fall 3 feet, and every single time they absolutely demolish it. So it's a jerk bait. It's regular, shallow running jerk bait.
Thank you.
Grab you some tackle. I don't have any pink hats in there. Some white ones. Grab a couple gray ones. Yeah. We'll finish out that side. Texas hat. Did you just get off football practice too with this guy?
No.
Wrestling?
No.
What's your name?
Dalton. Yeah, and do you think that the fish feel this forward-facing sonar?
That's a good question, dude. Yeah. Do the fish feel the forward-facing sonar? So think about this. Have you ever listened to a transducer when it's out of the water? A lot of times when your boat's parked in the garage and you have a big garage in front of it, next time you're in your garage and turn that sonar on, and when it's pinging, it pings off the front of your garage. Mm-hmm. Literally, you could put your ear in front of it, in between the wall and the transducer, and it sounds like someone's tapping a hammer. It's loud, dude. It is really, really loud. I'm hearing stories on tour. Guys are talking about these highly pressured lakes where they shine that forward-facing sonar on a fish, and once it hits them, then they swim off or get scared of it. I haven't witnessed it myself. Josh, he's the guy. He fishes one of the highly pressured lakes.
A lot of the fish I'm catching are by themselves on the bottom. I'll shine over there. That fish doesn't move.
Yeah.
You throw bait out there.
So I've heard stories of it, but I haven't seen it real time. So, I mean, they're catching the biggest and most fish ever in 2024 than we've ever seen before. Mm-hmm. At what point does it catch up and they start feeling that thing more? I haven't seen it yet. I really haven't.
There is something to it, though.
Yeah.
I'll tell you a story about crappie fishing. We had a 1994 kingfisher we fished out of in high school, and that transducer back there made a ticking noise. Just like that. You guys can't hear it, but you could hear it sitting in the boat. And we would fish I-40 at Lake Eufaula in Oklahoma, and there'd be 50 boats lined up. We got a back anchor out, we got a front anchor, and everyone just drops 10 or 15 or 20 minnow poles. Our boat, I guarantee, was the only one doing that ticking, and we would catch 10 times the fish anyone else would do.
They were coming to it.
So this goes to a catfishing story on the river. We used to drift shad heads on the river, catch big, 20, 30, 40-pound blue cats. And you were trying to get hung up. I know it's a different species, but you wanted that shad head to get in a rock, because as soon as it got in a rock, you pop that line as fast as you can, and that line's just popping the surface. We're in 3 feet of water, and within 10, 30 seconds, whatever, catfish would come, eat the shad head that's hung up, and you would be hooked up. So there's something to the noise.
Yeah.
What do they call that thing? The hydro wave?
Yeah.
There's something to it. I've never used one, but
it's a good point.
So the crappie thing, man, out of that kingfisher, we've never caught them like that since we got rid of that boat.
Yeah, my advice is don't even worry about that. Just go catch as many as you can. Shine that thing on as many as you can. that little jig-headed minnow. Do you throw a jig-headed minnow?
I've started, yes.
You started to, yeah.
Yep.
For those who don't know, there's been more bass on tour caught on a jig-headed minnow than anything. Essentially, it's a fluke with a little bit of weight on the head. And if you put that thing above their head and just twitch it a little bit, it just drives them absolutely nutty. But you could only use it with forward-facing sonar, so get after it.
Yeah. Another question that I have is, how do you get out of a slump or something like?
That's a great question. How do you get out of a slump? Whether you're pitching baseball, you're playing hockey or football, and you're just not making the right decisions, it seems like. In your mind, you think, right now, this is what I need to be doing. I have to be throwing a swim bait on a windblown point. It feels right to me. But then you go to the weigh-in and, you catch 12 pounds and everyone else has 20-plus pounds, and you're in a slump. How do you get out of that? You literally have to fish your way out of it. You have to keep on listening to that voice in your head, because you've gotten to that point by listening to that voice in your head. Slumps happen, man. They happen guiding. They happen tournament fishing. They happen in golf, tennis, any other sport. And you just have to play your way out of it. You really, really do. Maintain confidence in yourself. Don't second guess yourself. And a lot of times when your mind tells you, okay, there's a plan A and a plan B, and you're forced to choose one or the other, and it feels like you can't make the right decision. When you pick B and it should have been A, pick A, it should have been B. You got to tell yourself, hey, we're still on the right track, and maybe tomorrow we'll land on A when it should be A. So try to keep your head in the game and literally fish your way out of it.
Keep a good attitude. Just like
have to.
Major League Baseball pitchers, you don't see them get angry and start throwing stuff.
Yeah.
Because the pitching coach probably will be coming out there and taking them out of the game.
Yeah.
Once they get rattled, it's over. So
keep your head in it mentally, and it will turn around. It will absolutely turn around. And if it doesn't, go bowling. I don't know. Grab you some tackle, dude. Let's go. White shirt over here. How you doing? Good.
How do you tell different types of...
Ooh, that's a good question. What's your name? Isaiah. How do you tell the different types of fishing on the different types of fish species on forward-facing sonar? Have you seen live scope where a bass swims by? Isn't it cool how you can see the fins, and the direction of where the other day I saw a fish yawn. I saw that happen on forward-facing sonar. But how do you determine the species, Josh Jones?
Number one thing, look at the tail. The tail is going to tell you mainly what you're looking at. Split tail is what I call them. Is going to be a carp most of the
all
time.
the time.
They're so. We could talk about this for 2 hours. Crappie are typically out there sitting still. White crappie, that is. The black crappie, a lot of times, are grouped up with other black crappie swimming around. Gar are the only other fish that, other than crappie, that will go out there and suspend in the middle of the lake and just sit there.
Yeah.
And they fake you out a lot of times.
They do.
Until they turn.
Yep.
And they're like, okay, that's
sideways. Yeah.
Yeah. I've caught a lot of gar on a swim bait. Actually.
Yeah. If the image, if they're like this and the beam is, you can tell they're a gar just like that. But if they're cocked sideways 45 degrees, they look just like a bass and they move like a bass. They chase your lures down just like a bass. But mainly, so he's talking about just the physical, what it looks like physically. It's more of the attitude of the fish.
Yeah.
What is it doing under the water? Is it fishing? Is it swimming really fast and look like it's hunting? It's going to be a white bass or a bass. If it's just chilling there, kind of lethargic, a lot of times it's crappie, could be a gar, could be a bass in those colder months. But typically what we look for are moving fish that are predatory and are actively searching for the next thing to eat. And hopefully that next thing to eat is your swim jig or a swim bait. So looking at the attitude of what that species is doing will help you determine what it is. And that's just time on the water. You'll start to learn.
It takes years.
Obviously, have you seen a ball of shad? How they move real quick and they're tight and then they spread out and then get back together like that. Like when you see that with some things below it, dots below it that are chasing those down, that's an awesome thing. But it's really hard to tell. A little bit of experience and just learning, how they're moving. And a lot of times these fish are chasing down, these bass are chasing down looking for the next thing to eat.
But with the Lowrance and the Garmin, you can see the tail depending on what way they're going. And if it has a split, don't waste your time.
And the other thing about bass, too, on forward-facing sonar, they could be on the bottom. They could be 2 feet from the bottom. They could be 2 feet from the surface. So they're in the same tournament, the same day, you'll catch fish dead on the bottom and then also suspended. So just be kind of weary of that, where they could be anywhere in the water column at any time of the day, any time of year. So literally use your eyes underwater and you'll start to learn how bass move. Go grab some tackle.
How should we approach like highly pressured lakes or ponds?
Yeah, the question is, how do we approach highly pressured lakes or ponds? I'm going to go back to a point we made earlier, downsizing both your baits, the hook. A lot of times I see guys downsize, they downsize the swim bait or the fluke on there, but they don't downsize the jig head or the hook. There's nothing worse than seeing a 3-inch bait with a 2.5-inch jig head with like a 4/0 hook, just straight up like double X hook. When I say downsize, the whole package, from your line to the lure itself to the terminal tackle you're using, drop shot weights, drop shot hooks, small. But I'm going to go back to the line size thing. That really matters. I know some super stubborn anglers who will only fish with 15 to 20 pound test. And once you dip down into that 8 and 10 pound test, you will see that your soft plastics have so much more action than it would with 15 and 17 pound tests. So highly pressured lakes and ponds, just downsize. Again, just make sure when you get that bite on that piece of cover with that lighter line, where you're going to move this fish and how you're going to land it before the bite occurs.
Or reaction baits.
Fast. Get them to react.
Like a deep diving crankbait's one of my favorite. Just rip it on the bottom, and they just can't resist it.
Make them, force feed them into biting it. Those highly pressured lakes, they've seen a million spinner baits. They've seen a million wacky rig Senkos. They've seen some drop shots and a bunch of jigs. When you throw something that makes them react, like a spoon or a deep diving crankbait where it's deflecting on everything on the bottom, if there's a fish within 5 feet, oh, what's that? It's moving all erratically. I got to kill that thing. And that's how you get those fish, those highly pressured fish, into biting. So sometimes it's not what you'd think, slow and light line. A lot of times it is, but go to the extreme opposite side of that spectrum, bigger line, faster moving baits, and just make them bite, force feed them into biting. Bright colors, right? Chartreuse blue. I mean, you've been throwing a crankbait here the last month or so. You using shad colors or chartreuse?
Grab one.
Yeah, whatever.
Yeah, whatever.
It's more of the action that's deflecting that gets him.
I'm throwing a deep diver in 5 to 8 foot of water.
So he's grinding the bottom. Think about it. It's kicking up silt. It's deflecting off all those little rocks down there. And every time it deflects or kicks up silt, that right there is natural to that fish that's 5 feet away. That looks yummy to me. I saw a jig this morning. I saw a spinner bait this morning. I'm not going to bite those. But this thing is deflecting every which way. Got to have it. Mm-hmm. Go grab some tackle. There's probably some deep diving crankbaits in there. Curly hair. That's my guy right there. Yes. Dude, I wish I had hair like that, dude. I'm losing it.
You are losing.
I do. It's terrible. What's your name?
Jake.
Jake?
Yeah. My question is what moment in your life made you say, I want to do this for a living?
That's a good question, Jake. What moment in my life? How old are you?
I'm 15.
I was just about your age and I didn't have high school programs back then. I didn't have college programs back then. I had to fish pro-ams as an amateur from the back of the boat, entered tournaments, saved up money to fish out of the back of the boat. I was about 14, 15 years old when I was watching on TV some of these guys in these tournament shirts and these awesome boats. Like, hey, these guys are winning $50,000 per tournament. That's cool. I want to do that. I will tell you, for some of the older guys in here, it is never too late. A guy like Rick Clunn just fished his 500th Bassmaster tournament, and he's 70-something years old.
And he did well.
He did awesome too, yeah. So think about a bass. It doesn't matter if it's male or female. Throwing that lure at that bass does not care. He just cares about what is in front of him. Doesn't care who throws it. Young, old, does not matter. But yeah, I was about your age when I decided I'm going to get after it. The biggest thing over the next five years of your fishing career, 15 to 20 years old, stay focused and take it one step at a time. Don't ever think, oh, I'm good enough to go pro. Just, you will start to see in the standings in the high school tournaments, you'll start to see your name at the top. Move to the next level, pro-ams, college. And once you see your name at the top, take it to the next level and the next level and the next level. Same thing with baseball, hockey, football, whatever it is. Once you start to stand out in that year or that season, you're ready for the next step.
Yeah, fishing's been my number one passion my whole entire life. And I've been obsessed with it since I can remember. And I kind of lucked into what how I became who I am. I got fired and then started filming a few videos, caught some people's attention. And
didn't you work for a cable company?
I was a cable guy. I installed cable. So, I mean, I wanted to be a pro fisherman. I have letters from when I was in like 3rd grade talking about being a pro fisherman, not a doctor or an astronaut. I wanted to be a fisherman. But my whole life, everyone was telling me I couldn't do it because it was so hard. The pro-ams, it takes forever to climb the ladder. Don't listen to anyone. If you put your mind to it, I know it's cliche, but if I can do it, the cable guy from Oklahoma, any of you guys can do it. I promise.
That's awesome. And another point for the aspiring pro bass anglers, being a pro bass fisherman can mean a bunch of different things nowadays. I consider this guy a pro because he is very, very good at what he does, and he guides. You could be a social media phenom, social media personality, and be a professional at that too. So just because I have a label, pro bass fisherman, it can mean a lot more than just competing in tournaments. You can make a darn good living with a camera and cool fish catches, or taking someone out and, charging them X amount at the end of the day, be successful doing that. So there's a lot more, there are a lot more ways to become a pro in the sport of fishing than just competing. So keep that in mind as well.
10 or 15 years ago, you couldn't.
It's true.
Really?
More opportunities than ever for you young guys to make a living bass fishing, and guys will tell you, it can't be done relatives will tell you it can't be done. What are you doing? Go get a job. Go to, finish college, whatever it is. And hey, I recommend that. Absolutely do, because there's nothing more that these sponsors want to see is an educated fisherman that knows how to catch fish and can speak well and sell product. That's really what it's all about. So, again, just because you have a pro fishing label doesn't mean, you're only making your money or making a living by competing. So there's so many, just the opportunity is unreal these days. You just have to, work hard at it. It's a lot of hard work doing what he does, doing what I do, but it is so worth it. Go grab some tackle. In front right here.
So, do y'all have any tips for practicing forward-facing sonar and learning how to catch fish consistently with it?
Yeah, the question is, do you have any tips on how to practice forward-facing sonar? One big one I could give you is distance control, controlling the distance at what you see. I set my forward-facing at 100 feet. It's not an actual 100 feet. It feels like a little bit shorter, but on a really long cast, I could hit the end of my beam on my screen at 100 feet. The biggest thing I could tell you to practice distance control, it's all about accuracy, and he will tell you, you have to get within, when you see a fish on forward-facing sonar, let's say suspended 6 feet under the surface, you have to get it just past that fish and swim your lure above their head just past that fish for them to eat it. And there's no better way to learn that distance than by learning it. What I like to do what I first started doing is I went to a bridge piling. It could be a dock pole, it could be a buoy, but just take your trolling motor right up to it, and as it's a half a cast length away, it shows up on your graph, right? It shows the rope on the buoy, it shows the bridge pillar. And that's the actual distance. I'm looking at it, right? I mean, to me, that's 40 feet away. But look at it on your graph to see exactly how far. It may be 50, 60 feet on your graph, but the actual distance because I'm looking at that buoy or I'm looking at that bridge piling. And then when you correlate it to what you're seeing on the screen there, you know exactly the distance you need to make. So when a fish shows up at 60 feet, I know it's actually where that pillar is. Does that make sense? You know the actual distance, and you could do that with casting. You could practice casting that way too. Try to aim for, if you have your distance set at 100 feet, try to hit that 50-foot mark every time. Make that cast, watch that splash, watch your lure go down, and that way your distance control is absolutely nails, because when you're trying to trick an 8 to 10 pound bass into biting, your presentation better be perfect. A lot of times you only got one shot. One shot, if she's interested and she comes up, she realizes it's fake. A lot of times you can't get that fish to bite again. He can by making multiple casts, multiple presentations, but distance is huge on that. Absolutely huge.
So something I've never actually told anyone.
Oh, here it comes.
This is a trick that I learned. So when I was learning the forward-facing sonar, for the first 3 years, I caught a couple 15-pounders, couple more 13s, whatever. My distance was at 50. It sounds crazy because 50 is from here to that wall, not close. Even from here to the wall. In all my early YouTube videos, you see me just pitching. Well, what that did when my distance is only at 50 and my depth's at whatever it was, I could see the profile of the fish much easier because it was more zoomed in. Right. So that helped me differentiate. That's a carp, that's catfish, that's a bass. And then I slowly moved it to 80. And now I'm at 100. Yeah. So I started at 50. I learned it at 50. All the forward-facing sonar,
There's
I learned
more
at 50.
Detail at 50.
Way more detail. You can see the tail. You can see it all. I learned it at 50. Then year 4, 5, 3, whatever. I got my years mixed up. I put it to 80, and now I'm at 100. So that's a tip. And actually, I've been using it at 50 a lot lately, and I like it a lot.
That's awesome.
So obviously you can't use it at 50 when you're bombing a crankbait 120 feet.
But greater detail.
Yeah, but much more detail when it's zoomed in, and I recommend at least trying it.
That's cool. Good deal. Who grabs you some tackle there?
But you can't move as quick. That's the only problem.
Right, because you're only looking 50. Female in the back there. You're on the spot. Can you pull that mic just a little bit closer? There you go. What's your name?
Gracie.
Gracie. Very cool.
I'm not a fisherman, but my brother is. And this last tournament, it was thunderstorming the entire time. And I
Yes.
was wondering what's the best lures and techniques to use while in.
Yeah, it
the
must have
thick
been
of it.
PK, right? PK. Yeah. Did you guys how'd brother do? Did you guys do any good? That's good, dude. That's really good. Heck yeah.
In that kind of weather.
Yeah. So stormy weather. We're talking rain. We're talking wind. We're talking low light. I'm going to go back to that spinnerbait thing. There was an old rule set into place in the tournament bass fishing handbook that when it's cloudy, rainy, stormy out, you throw something shiny like a spinnerbait, chartreuse and white spinnerbait. And again, let's go back to that wind thing, because when these storms roll in Texas, a lot of times a south wind comes with it, followed by a west wind, and then afterwards, sometimes there's a north wind. So the fish reposition as Mother Nature changes. The fish reposition just like we would. But I'm always going to fish the windy side, and I'll just pick up a good old spinnerbait, try to get a couple bites doing that, then expand more into the swim bait thing. Think about how. Forget about the lightning and the rain and all that stuff. Just know that storms come through and it is low light. Let's not cast a jig or a Senko underneath a dock, because fish use docks for shade. They use overhanging timber for shade. When everything is shady, they're going to be out roaming around. That's when he catches them really good, when they're just kind of roaming in open water. A spinnerbait does a really good job at attracting fish. They'll swim a long way to bite it. It's real flashy. It's thumpy. They could pick it up. They pick up the vibration and the flash really easily. So just think about how it's just like fishing at dawn or dusk. It is low light, and the fish won't be underneath things. They'll just be out and around those things.
Aside from a big swim bait, a buzz bait.
Yes.
One of my all-time favorite baits to fish. I haven't thrown one in years.
That's a good one.
But I'm remembering some amazing days I had when it was raining all day, and we just threw black buzz baits all day long.
I'll tell you, a buzz bait is the best. It's the absolute best when you're in the back of a pocket or one of those flat banks I'm talking about, and when you're retrieving that buzz bait and there's a bubble trail behind it, that is primo. If there's no bubble trail, you may get half the amount of bites, but when there's a bubble trail around it, it's something in the water, the oxygen level or the air, barometric pressure. When you have those bubbles, hold on, because one's going to bite it.
Okay.
Same thing goes with a popper or whopper plopper too. Top water.
The best bite I ever had, I'll never forget, it was an 8-1 on a cloudy, rainy day like that, and it exploded. That
Came
black buzz
unglued.
bait exploded.
That's awesome.
I was 17 years old, so that was 19 years ago.
Grab you some tackle there, Gracie. Thank you for the question. What else we got, guys? We've gone almost an hour and a half now. So that's an excellent question. Do I think live scope is an unfair advantage? Has it taken some of the traditional angle of bass fishing away? It absolutely has. I had Josh on my podcast a couple months ago. He admitted to himself, like, you take that thing away from me and I'm not as good as a fisherman as you. But with that thing, I would hate to go head to head with him on an unfamiliar body of water. So, man, I don't know what the answer is. I know the tournament organization I'm in, Bassmaster Elites, they're actually looking into all the questions and comments, and they're talking about downsizing these giant graphs. I mean, some of these graphs are 22 inches long. I mean, think about it. In this high school organization, it's really about some of these tournaments. It's about who's got the best electronics and the best boats, and the best rigging, all that stuff. And I hate that for some of these kids because we can't all afford that. But there is an angle to that of, I'm going to learn this thing. I'm going to be the best at it. And I'm going to collect as many checks as possible by fishing. It is a completely legal way of fishing. It is a different way of fishing than I grew up fishing. So love it or hate it. Sometimes I love it. Sometimes I hate it. It is here to stay. Absolutely. As far as the unfair advantage thing is, man, it is definitely a spotlight on that deer. It really is. It really is. But they don't bite 100% of the time. I get the argument of it's just a tool. I get that too. I get it. But for now, for what I do, the only thing I can do to compete is to get as good as I possibly can with it to compete. And that's why I try to get free guide trips from this guy right here. And he gives them to me every now and then. And I learn.
He buys steaks.
Yeah. Absolutely. That is a great statement.
I'm torn because we have to do it to compete. I'm going to always have to utilize the newest technology to stay where I'm at. He's going to as well. But I see where people are coming from. You got a local guy on his local lake. He's been fishing it forever. And then some guy like me, because I've done it, shows up to a lake. I go to the middle of the lake and catch a 50-pound stringer on a lake he's caught one 10-pounder at in 25 years. You know, I kind of get it where they're coming from, but they can join the club as well. You know, like they can learn it just like I learned it. I've spent thousands and thousands of hours learning it, and a lot of people are trying to discredit what we've done. Whether they discredit him getting to the level he's at, everyone's going to try to shoot someone down for whatever reason. But there's an art to it. Doing what I do takes years to learn. And but I definitely get where people think it's unfair, because in a way it really is unfair to the guys that didn't have it in 2015 like I did. You know, they're not going to be able to fish every day. You know, they might get to go out once or twice a week. You know, they're never going to be at our level. I hate to say it, but learning that screen takes thousands of hours. Just knowing that's a carp. I can roll up on a fish, that's a carp. That's a blue cat. I can tell you if it's a flathead catfish. Yeah. I can tell you the species just by looking at it, you know, and that takes years of lots of hours. But I get it. I told him I want to see, let's just say there's 6 tournaments, 3 forward facing tournaments and 3 without it. And that's going to prove who's the overall best fisherman.
Yeah, it's definitely a dilemma, real age dilemma that who knows where it's going to go. But for the time being, where it's going to catch as many
I
bass
love
as
it.
possible.
It's so much fun. I can't wait to get back out there and use my active target. But I will say this. I think knowledge of the active target, the forward-facing, the live scope, knowledge of the live scope is going to beat knowledge of the lake 95 out of 100 times. So if you've been to this lake 100 times, that doesn't matter if you're fishing against a guy with forward-facing sonar, and you're seeing a lot of the old fishermen that are amazing fishermen not compete because they're not good at the sonar. They don't want to use the sonar or whatever it may be. The sonar is going to beat the older guys, which in a way could put a lot of the older guys out of a job, you know, and not even the older guys. I mean, like an angler I like a lot, Seth Fighter. He doesn't know who I am. He probably maybe knows, but he doesn't know I'm a fan, right? I was seeing him come through this, the process of learning the sonar. Well, he was late to the party because he was a Humminbird guy. Yeah. And as you know, the Humminbird wasn't good. So he's 3 years behind, and now he might lose his tour card because he's like 90th in Angler of the Year right now because he didn't jump on the bandwagon, on the forward-facing bandwagon. So he's an amazing angler. He was Angler of the Year like 4 years ago. Yeah. 5 years ago. Yeah. But now he can't compete because he's behind on the sonar. And he can't compete, right? But you get it.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, essentially just get good with it and use it while we can. So absolutely a hot topic in the sport of fishing. What I want to do now is everyone just stay seated. I want to give these rods away, but I want to wrap up this video. For those of you who tuned in, especially some of the young aspiring anglers, thank you guys for tuning in to this video. We're going to do a couple more of these, but hopefully you learned a little something. A lot of these kids asked a lot of great questions. Myself, Josh, did our best answering them. So thank you guys for tuning in. We're out on the video side, but I want to give away these rods here, guys, and I got a bunch of hats and things still I want to give away to you. I don't want to leave here with any of this stuff, so thank you guys for watching, and just stay seated. I'm going to give away these rods, and we'll give away the rest of the stuff. Good questions, boys. Appreciate you.